Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to do something a little different and out of the norm for my videos. I'm going to go into detail about the main types of photography that are available to those of you listing properties for sale. There are tons of terms and different styles, and today I'm going to go into detail about each and every one so you can easily determine the style of photography that matches the brand you're putting together. I'll go over the names of these styles so you know what to ask for. I'll talk about the processes involved in crafting those style of images, and I'll give it a price rating so you have a good idea as to what it'll cost no matter the area or market. With that said, let's jump in. We have lots of stuff to talk about this time, so I want to get right into it. I'm going to start with what's traditionally the cheapest types of photography, and as the video goes on, everything will get more expensive and the quality will get higher. Let's get started. Option 1, available light photography. This is the simplest and cheapest option for your photo needs. For these images, all that's really needed is a camera. Some photographers will use a tripod or a monopod while on site, but neither of these are required to get the job done. It's a single image, take very little time on site, and almost no production time, so they traditionally have a very short turnaround, which means no wait time. The only downfall with these images is quality. Take a look at this example. Notice a few things about the image since I'll be using the same shot for every style, hopefully making it easier to notice the small differences. There are a few things I want you to look at when I show you each image. Number 1, clarity. How sharp is this image? Number 2, colors. Are the colors correct? And how much contamination is there in those colors? And number 3, windows. How visible is the outside through those windows? How much do you want to show? Now that you know what to look for, let's look at this first image one more time. Once again, this is the cheapest option available and is basic available light photography. Honestly, this is my least favorite of all styles I'll talk about today. This should really be used for discount or as-is properties where every single marketing cent matters. It can also be used sometime in a very small home that have lots of natural light, but I personally cannot recommend it for any property you really want to showcase or make stand out in the marketplace. Next up on the list, option 2, HDR photography, software based. Okay, now this is where it might get a little tricky because there are two different types of HDR photography available. This one that I'm going to talk about first is software based, and it's the cheaper of the two options. I'll talk about the other option a little later on since it's more entailed, but HDR simply stands for high dynamic range, and it refers to taking the process of multiple images at different exposures and blending those images together, create a more range of light compared to what the eye sees naturally. In order to create these, a photographer will require a camera and a steady tripod. The way these images are generally created is by taking a series of 3 to 5 images, all at different exposures, and using some sort of software like Lightroom, Photoshop, or more advanced programs like Luminar or HDR effects. Much like the available light photography, it does not take much time on site, but it does involve more post-production time, and that's why it moves up one notch on the price scale. Since it is mainly software that does all the post-production work, and all that can be batch processed with very little intervention from the content creator, it still keeps it low on the price and the turnaround time fairly low. If you need images this day, this is a great example. Take a look at this image as an example. First thing you'll notice that's very indicative of the software process HDR look is the over clarification, leaving these dark areas on the walls, ceilings, and corners. When you see this in the image, it almost guarantees this was the process used. Next, notice the colors and how they look compared to the first image we looked at. Everything is sharper than the first image for sure, but can you tell it's missing that crucial element of human interaction in the editing process? Lastly, look at the windows and determine if that's the way you like them. On a side note here, there's not a perfect choice when it comes to an image style or window clarity. It's all about what you like the most. Some people prefer the crystal clear look, while some people prefer them to be a little more bright. There's no one-size-fits-all option here. I'm just trying to give you the most information, so you can make the most informed choices. Now, back to our regularly scheduled program. Generally speaking, this is not my favorite form of property photography, but I understand why people use it, and I understand why people like it. It has a super quick turnaround time, which can be required occasionally. It's also still on the cheaper end of the spectrum, so it can be used even on your lower quality properties without needing to use a ton and still have quality usable images to show the public. Next up, option 3, flash photography. Now, this is my personal go-to style of photography for an average property that's 2,500 square foot or below and needs a quicker turnaround. In order for a photographer to create these images, they'll need a camera, a steady tripod, and at least one off-camera flash, though typically they have between 3 and 5 strobes. This takes a little more time on site. The process involves not only adding light to the rooms you are photographing, but also lighting all the rooms in the frame. Every room that you can see, this makes everything look brighter. This means a lot of walking back and forth over the property between shots, and this is the main thing that adds time on site. Flash photography also involves more post-production than the previous two methods. Even though the basic HDR we just talked about do involve post-production, that's all done mainly by software and programs. The difference between everything I've talked about so far and everything I'll talk about for the rest of this series is mainly about the amount of time an actual person has to edit these images for. Everything done in post-production so far has involved almost nothing and no time by the content creator. But as I progress, every image will take more and more time being created by an actual human being spending their time and mental artistry to complete. Each image from this point on will be touched and edited individual by a real live person. Now that you know that, let's take a look at this example image. First thing, the clarity. Adding the extra light on site really adds to the clarity and sharpness in a natural way that the other two ways just didn't seem to do as well. Secondly, compare the colors. They're still not perfect, but the difference is night and day between these and the previous two images I've shown you. The added light allows for a higher accuracy of color, and the extra time in post-production can really be noticed. Lastly, the windows. Once again, still not 100% clear, but as mentioned before, you might not want that. Also, keep in mind that the smaller the room is, the clearer a window will look with flash photography method. As I stated when we started talking about flash photos, this is my personal go-to method for an average size property, 2,500 square foot and below. The main reason I use this size in particular is because usually the rooms are not too big. This makes a huge difference because the bigger the room, the less effective the general flash photography is. You can still use this style for larger properties, but expect the biggest rooms to not look as great as the smaller ones. Once you start getting to larger properties with larger rooms and higher price point, more is expected of your listing quality. So therefore, I would recommend one of the next two photo options I'll talk about. Flash photography makes your property look amazing. It still provides a decent amount of images, and it's still cheaply priced for what you get. This method gives individual attention to each image so the quality is higher than the last two, but does not involve an extreme amount of time editing or outsourcing to another editor, so it keeps the price lower and manageable for an average property's marketing budget. We have two options left here, and they are both what would be considered high-end or luxury photography products. These are images for your larger properties or properties you want to stand out on the marketplace. Even if you're trying to brand yourself as a luxury agent, these are the two you go after. They are both going to be the most expensive option, take the most time on site, and the most time being edited by a person in post-production. While both styles are more expensive than all the other styles we've discussed so far, both of these styles are very similar in price to one another, so I'll just go over the differences and final look and processes to create. Option 4. This one's called Flamebean style. This name comes from a blend of the two types of images that are combined to create it, both of which we've already spoken about. A flash frame from flash photography and an ambient flame from ambient photography. Both post-processed separately and blended together and given a final edit. This style is traditionally more popular in the advertising and architectural world because it's more of a moody image. It showcases shadows and directional light really, really well. Option 5. Hand-blended HDR. I know I mentioned HDR imagery as one of the cheaper options way earlier, and if you recall, I said I'd bring them back up, and here they are. Let's begin with the fact that these images are way different than the last for a few reasons. They are taken the same on site as the other images, but the difference is that instead of being software processed, these images are hand blended. All the layers stacked on one another and parts painted in painstakingly. It's an entailed process, and that's why it takes more time to create, costs more to produce, and looks way better than the other. The first comparison I want to make here is between the software process HDR and the hand blended one. Here you can see the hand blended one on the right side, and even though they're both acceptable images, look at how much differently they look. Next, let's try comparing the other high-end image, the Flamebean style. To keep it simple, I'll keep the hand blended HDR image on the right, and now the Flamebean style is up on the left. Notice they're both high-end luxury images, but they both have different feels. Which one matches your brand? Which style are you promoting? How do you want to be seen in the marketplace? The hand-blended HDR image is the most popular of the two for selling properties on the MLS, and even though I personally prefer the look of the Flamebean style, I totally understand why the hand-blended HDR is much popular. It's brighter, it's sharper, easy to view and estimate size on smaller viewing devices like cell phones, which, by the way, roughly 90% of all images will be viewed on phones over computer screens, so it's something important to think about in your marketing strategy. Now, let's go through all the options I've shown you throughout this video for a better comparison. First off, ambient light. Next option, software-based HDR imagery. Third option, and my favorite, flash photography. Then we have the Flamebean blend technique. And lastly, the hand-blended HDR imagery. I hope this information helps you when trying to decide the style of imagery that matches the branding you want to put across as an agent, broker, or brokerage. If you like the information I presented and the way I presented it, then please push that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps me a lot, and it helps me decide what content to create in the future. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.